everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Nature City Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Pradelli. I'm also the CEO and co-founder of the company, having started Nature City over 20 years ago with my wife, Beth. And since then, it's been our honor to have served over 500,000 Americans by offering them the best supplements we can make. We have a real exciting episode to talk about today, a real exciting topic, I should say. We're talking about a novel ingredient called Levagen Plus. It's something I've been following the science as it evolved over the last 7 to 8 years. Really exciting for joint health and muscle recovery and some other things that we're going to discuss. And what's really neat about it is it works very differently than some other joint health ingredients you may have heard of. So much so we've just added it to upgrade to our joint health formula, True Joint FLX, hopefully taking what's already a great formula to a new level altogether. To help me break it down, we welcome back to the podcast, Dr. Christopher Bailey. He's from Gencor. He's the Director of Scientific Affairs, I believe. Is that right, Chris?
Yes. Yep.
And Gencor, of course, makes and supplies the Levagen Plus ingredient we'll be talking about today. So, Chris, welcome back again. Thank you for making time for us. Why don't you just give us a little overview of what Levagen Plus is, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, Levagen is palmitoyl ethanolamide, or PEA as an acronym. It's a fatty acid amide that's found both within our bodies and also within the diet in things like peanuts, soy, corn, eggs as well. But the goal here is to supplement an additional form of it through supplementation with the product that Carl alluded to that's coming out shortly. Or has it launched yet, Carl?
We are anxiously awaiting. It was supposed to be here 2 weeks ago, and they were running a little behind. So, a lot of people are waiting on this product. So we're hopefully very, very soon.
Awesome. So, yeah, the goal here is to use this version that we've done quite a few studies on that we'll discuss today. And then we've even improved upon it, the plus version that Carl is using in his formula for enhanced absorption and functionality.
Great. I imagine a lot of the audience is not familiar with the PEA nutrient that is really what Levagen is. I think you mentioned we get a little from diet, but I think most of the PEA is that we use in our bodies is produced by the body. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. In response to the harmful stimuli in our environment, let's say I bump my hand on the table, my body will produce a small amount of PA to support a balanced inflammatory response and also help to provide relief from that discomfort. And then once that local area is depleted of PEA that we've run out of temporarily, we start to feel that discomfort and things come back until we replenish it. So the goal here is to provide a constant level of PEA that's elevated through the day to better address those everyday aches and discomforts associated with joint discomfort especially, but also some other area health benefit categories that we're going to get into today beyond joint health. And the way it works is through activating a pathway called PPAR alpha, and that affects both the inflammatory response as well as your response to discomfort. So the combination of the two, there are some other mechanisms we can get into in a longer discussion, but that's really the key mechanism. And something that comes up with this that people ask, they'll read on the internet about the endocannabinoid system and PEA and how it interacts with that. And basically it indirectly can interact with cannabinoid receptors in the body, but itself is not a cannabinoid, hemp-derived, cannabis-derived, anything like that. So it is able to be used by athletes in sporting bodies worldwide. But it's a nature identical ingredient is how I would describe it.
Yeah, it's not a cannabinoid itself, I think is what you're saying. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Although it supports the endocannabinoid system as a whole. Did I characterize that correctly?
Yeah, and so that's a secondary way it can help support relieving bodily discomfort and supporting a balanced inflammatory response. But the core one is that PPAR alpha pathway.
Since our cells, I think, release the PEA to help manage discomfort and stress when required, I imagine the body's demand for PEA likely increases least for most of us, especially those of us who try to stay active as we get older. Do we get less efficient at producing PEA as we age, as we see with many other nutrients in the body?
Yeah, with age, there can be a decline in your ability to produce PEA. So by supplementing it, we can keep those levels constant. And just to go back for 1 second, I forgot to add on that mechanism part. The way that we elucidate the mechanism of action in research is a process of elimination. So if you think there's a pathway an ingredient's working on, you look at preclinical or pre-human models of research where you basically block the receptor you think it's working through. And then you see if administering the ingredient still provides a benefit. And if it doesn't, you've isolated a major pathway. So we looked at models where there was no PPAR alpha receptors present and administered PEA, and there was no benefit from a inflammatory response or bodily discomfort relief. So researchers, not Gencor specifically, but in the public domain on PEA, were able to isolate that, hey, this is the major mechanism by which it works through.
Absolutely. And given that both the body's main demand for PEA goes up as we get older, and maybe our body becomes less efficient at making it, as you said, it makes it an ideal candidate for dietary supplement to replenish what our body is already making. But I believe, even though PEA has been known for many, many years, I believe really it's only been available as a supplement probably for the last 15, 16 years, at least some of the research I did. But before really, not all PEA ingredients are created equal, as we're going to discuss. But before consumers purchase a PEA supplement, Chris, there's a couple things they need to be aware of, both quality concerns, absorption challenges, and, perhaps some others. Can you address these?
Yeah, that's a great point. So I wouldn't say that Gencor was the first producer of PEA in the world.
Right.
But what we do is we bring ingredients carefully to the market with intent and purpose as far as health benefits, also for safety and manufacturing quality. So part of that process was going through what's called self-affirmed GRAS, or generally recognized as safe. Is the full explanation of that, but it's a process by which you have independent experts and toxicologists review the manufacturing process of your ingredient, history of the ingredient's use prior to being launched as a dietary ingredient, any kind of information on health benefits it may provide, and determine that it is safe at the recommended levels to use in dietary supplement products. So that's what Levagen went through, which is unique among PEA. There are other sources of PEA out there for sale, but I don't believe all of them have gone through that process. So that was first and foremost. And then we also follow good manufacturing practices to make sure all of our batches are consistent in their PEA content. This is a pure material, so essentially almost 100% of the composition of the powder that's going into those capsules that Carl is using is palmitoyl ethanolamide. And the process we went through to upgrade it, I can get into a little bit if we're at that point, Carl, to talk.
Yeah, well, no question about it. I guess maybe we should clarify for the audience. You have two ingredients. You have the regular Levagen PEA, and then you came out with a Levagen Plus, which has enhanced bioavailability. You maybe just want to speak how Levagen Plus is different, some of the commentary you're going to make, and maybe how and where it's made, and then maybe finally how you enhance absorption, which allows us to use less of the Levagen that we otherwise might have to.
Of course. Yeah. So the original ingredient is manufactured by a partner of Gencor, and then we bring that ingredient to Australia to a company we partner a lot with called Pharmacobiotechnologies. And what their specialty is taking ingredients they don't produce themselves directly, but applying processing technology to these ingredients to improve their absorption, whether that's an oil or a powder or a liquid or converting oil to a powder. They have all these different capabilities to improve how formulators work with it and then how the consumers of these products benefit from that improvement, whether it's using a lower amount, as Carl said, better absorption, faster absorption, in some cases, higher stability, better taste profile, things like that are all things that Pharmaco can improve through this processing technology. So the one that we're going to talk about today is called LipiSperse. And so we applied the LipiSperse technology to Levagen to create Levagen Plus. What's unique about LipiSperse is that it creates these repulsive forces to push the particles away from each other. And in doing so, it helps to make them better dispersed through water. So it's not water soluble. It's not going to disappear when you stir with a spoon into liquid, but it is going to readily disperse, kind of like a snow globe. It's the same appearance it's going to look like when you put Levagen Plus into water. And by making it more dispersible, it's better absorbed, but then it also opens up the options for going away from just capsules to stick packs or gummies and whatnot. So for formulators, it opens up the way you can use the ingredient. For the consumer, it allows you to get better absorption out of that same product. And the nice thing about it is it's only 10% by weight excipient. You're still getting 90% palmitoyl ethanolamide. So with a lot of other ingredient technologies, when you try to improve absorption, up to half the weight of the material could be other ingredients aiding that absorption or pharmacokinetics. But with this, we're only looking at 10%. So when you put it into a capsule, you're getting the benefits of improved absorption, but you're not having to take 10 capsules to enjoy those benefits. And a lot of the research on standard unformulated palmitoyl ethanolamide that hasn't been improved by LipiSperse uses fairly high dosages.
Yeah.
So there's still benefits behind consuming unformulated PEA, but from a realistic standpoint, you would have to consume a lot of capsules. And if you wanted to put it into a drink, it's not going to mix in water. It's going to sit on the top.
Yeah.
So even if you get around capsules and try to put it into a drink, if it's not Levagen Plus, you're going to be basically pouring back powder sitting on top of the liquid. It's going to be an uncomfortable swallowing experience, to say the least.
Yeah, well, I think, one of the other advantages, of course, of being called water dispersible, I mean, our digestive systems are water-based, right? So that helps with the, I guess, increase the bioavailability, I imagine. Is that right?
Yeah, we did a pharmacokinetic study on our material compared to unformulated palmitoyl ethanolamide, and we found it was almost 2 times more absorbed than your standard PEA.
Yeah. Just as an aside, Chris, the HC audience is a little bit familiar with Pharmaco Biotechnologies. We did a podcast with George Kokinis, who uses Aquacell technology to enhance the absorption of our true omega-3 fish oil. So he's just a brilliant guy, and, very excited to hear he's involved with this too.
Yeah, whenever we get into the really nitty-gritty details of the engineering and whatnot of these ingredients, George is always a great asset to have on these calls, being the inventor of these technologies.
Absolutely. So the bottom line with the Levagen Plus is over the regular Levagen ingredient, it almost increased the bioavailability of the PEA by up to 2 times. So previously, for example, where you were seeing a benefit with Levagen at 600, you can almost use 300 and expect the same type of response. Is that essentially what it does?
Correct. Our first study used 300 or 600 milligrams of Levagen. And then when we went to Levagen Plus, we went to 350 milligrams of Levagen Plus, and that provides, because there's that excipient matrix in there, 300 milligrams of PEA.
Chris, before I want to talk about that study, I think you're referring to your first joint health study. I want to discuss that in a moment. But one of the things I want to just elaborate on a little bit, if you could, as you mentioned, Levagen works a little differently in the body. One of the things that attracted Nature City to it for our True Joint formula was it seems complementary to some of the other ingredients in there. A lot of them work to help, produce a healthy inflammatory response, through the arachidonic acid pathway, right? The 5 LOX, help them maintain healthy 5 LOX and COX-2 activity. But as you mentioned, Levagen essentially works by helping to, activate the PPAR alpha receptors. What is the significance of doing that? Has that helped the body in terms of a healthy inflammation response and really reducing discomfort?
Yeah. So by supporting that inflammatory response, it's interlinked both in bodily discomfort and inflammatory response for So that translates to a wide host of benefits. What we're going to talk about mainly today is joint health, whether that's, you're working out and you have a little bit of discomfort induced by exercise. Let's say you're lifting heavy weights or you're running on a high impact surface. The inflammation and discomfort go hand in hand. So the benefits are going to be applied to that. But then we also have some other studies like on head discomfort. We also have a study on sleep that we're going to get into. But controlling that, or not controlling, but supporting that response, that's already something our body is meant to do endogenously. We're just aiding it with more substrate to support that process, means that we come out with a balancing but not out of control suppression. And that will lead into the implications for weightlifting and exercise performance that we'll talk about after the joint study.
Yeah. Glad you brought up the endogenous factor, because since as we mentioned, our bodies make PEA, so they're used to using it. They're totally using it, so we're not introducing something the body doesn't recognize, right? And it's something that's important just for safety reasons, but I imagine your body's less likely to develop a tolerance to PEA as a result over time. Is that fair?
Correct. We've seen research pre-Levagen Plus going back many years, and we actually worked with one of the foremost research on this topic, Dr. Piamelli, who did a lot of the research investigating how PEA works in the body as a natural substrate. And then he's also been in discussions with us on more recent studies on our material specifically. So this is something we've had a lot of time to work with, and both members of Gencor have been consuming it for many years, including our founder, Venkatesh. But then we also have a whole host of clinical studies, 11 and counting, on the oral ingestion of this material. And we haven't seen any indication that there would be a tolerance effect.
Terrific. So let's talk a little bit about what you observed in the joint health studies that you have published. I think there's two that we're going to talk about. What were some of the findings, and how long does it typically take to start seeing benefits?
Yeah, so the first study, we saw both a improvement in joint discomfort and stiffness, and then also we found a reduction in occasional stress. And when you're having joint discomfort, joint irritation, it's going to be on the top of your mind, right? We all stand up, we walk, we go to the grocery store, we do errands, we stand up out of bed, we sit back down, we get up and off the couch. So even if you're not a super active person, that's something that's going to take up a lot of your thoughts during the day if you're having some kind of discomfort. Yep. So in that first study, we looked at not only the improvements in the joint factor, but that psychological factor. The two are really intertwined. As far as timing, I'll talk specifically about our second study, which was on Levagen Plus at the 350 milligrams per day of the total material, providing 300 milligrams of PEA. But in that study, we found benefits as early as day 3. And what I'll go over is the difference between from baseline in each group versus the placebo. So with the study, we found that there was reductions in this joint discomfort in the morning and in the evening as early as day 3 when compared to where subjects started. Now, when comparing to placebo, what we're looking at is the difference in the decrease over time between the two groups. So where the effect of Levagen Plus was greater than the placebo occurred on day 14. And the reason for that is that in any study looking especially at joint health and joint discomfort, there's a large placebo effect. So if I told you, hey, Carl, you're going to feel great tomorrow morning, you're going to wake up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and you're going to do some jumping jacks when you take this, you're already in a frame of mind that you're going to perceive less discomfort. Yeah. So regardless of which group you're in, there was going to be some effect that you just mentally perceive. But when we see that benefit outweighs the psychological factor and gets really into all the physiological benefits, was day 14. Yeah. So if you're a consumer taking the ingredient at 350 milligrams, you're going to start to see benefits likely in a few days, because this ingredient does work on that PPAR alpha pathway, and that's going to be somewhat acute in perception, in my opinion. But as far as the difference from a placebo, it's going to take the 2 weeks.
Well, and look, that does make sense, right? Because in terms of the short-term effects, because look, your body releases PEA, as you outlined earlier, whenever it, exposed to some type of cold injury or discomfort, or where it senses the body needs some type of relief, I guess. So you'd expect, if we're supplementing the body's stores of PEA, that you could see a benefit, to the extent you need it in short term. So that does make sense. And I'm glad you brought up the placebo control. Yes, joint health studies are notorious, right, for huge placebo effects. So yeah, no surprise there that, it took a while for the placebo effect to subside. And after a couple of weeks, you sort of clear significant advantage of the Levagen Plus. And I think the first study, Chris, 8 weeks. Was that right? I think.
I believe so. I don't have that details of that study right in front of me, but I think it was 8 weeks. The second one was 2 weeks, and that's where we got on that last day the improvement at day 14.
Yeah, I made a note here for us. So yeah, it looks like the first study was 8 weeks, and again, you did 2 different doses. You did 300 and 600 of the regular Levagen. So I think Levagen Plus would be almost equivalent, you'd expect. And it was, I think, a little bit of a dose-dependent response. So the 600 worked better than 300.
Yeah, there was one more joint measure that benefited in the 600 milligram compared to the 300. So what I did in summarizing it was just talk about what's found at both dosages. Yeah. And then we can share the full paper, since it is in the public domain, for more of the nuances between 300 and 600. But once we found that improved pharmacokinetic profile or improved bioavailability, that's when we dedicated the research to really be at 350 milligrams. We do have some studies in other health benefit categories that require a higher dose.
Yes.
But for the most part, I would say the most common dose we use in research on Levagen Plus is the 350 milligrams of total material, offering that 300 milligrams of PEA.
So make sure I heard you right. You said in that study, the 600 was about 1.4 times the benefit of the 300. Did I hear that correctly?
It's so in the pharmacokinetic study, it was 1.75 times greater absorption than unformulated PEA, but I don't have the specific numbers as 300 versus 600 in that first study.
Right.
I focused mainly for this today on the Levagen Plus material that you're using, the improved version.
That all sounds good. So many people, like me in particular, use our True Joint FLX joint muscle formula really to help recover from exercise or physical activity, reduce discomfort that might cause. Can the PEA in Levagen Plus help in this area too?
It's a great question. So the answer is yes, it can help with exercise recovery. And we already alluded to the joint health benefits from those 2 clinical trials of Levagen and Levagen Plus. What we found is that there was a reduction in markers of a marker of muscle damage known as myoglobin. So that's something that when you do really strenuous weightlifting, repeated bouts of exercise, in this clinical trial, we did that with the goal of inducing muscle damage by having someone do the same exercise over and over again. And then we saw that mitigation and the rise of myoglobin typically seen with exercise. So not only is it providing those benefits for your joints, but your muscle as well. And what we have a little bit of new data on to share, not huge amount of details I can say yet until it's in the public domain, but it's even we've even looked further into how it can affect or not affect your exercise progress in the gym outside of protecting your muscles and your joints.
So you mean it might help exercise performance? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. So there was actually an improvement in a marker of lower body muscle power. And the interesting thing is we talked a little bit about the pathway by which this ingredient works to help support a balanced inflammatory response. And especially in the bodybuilding and weightlifting realm, consumers have a concern, hey, if we're doing something to support the body's natural inflammatory response and process, is that going to have a negative impact on my benefits from weightlifting? Because weightlifting and exercise does induce a natural inflammatory response that we need to adapt and overcome to build more muscle, to get stronger. So if we interact with that process, what happens to our gains in the gym? We don't want to take that away at the same time we're protecting our muscle and our joints. So we did this study to look at supplementation with Levagen Plus against placebo while they both were doing a weightlifting program to see if it affected their progress. And the nice thing was we found no difference in their progress in terms of accruing lean muscle mass, but the Levagen Plus group had this benefit for lower body power. So not only is it having a beneficial effect on performance, it's also not taking away from your ability to grow muscle.
I'm glad you brought this up because, a lot of times inflammation always gets pegged as a bad guy, right? And that's why we always talk about a healthy inflammation response, because you do need some inflammation. Without the inflammation process, we would all die, right? So it's very important. But this is something I think not many people have focused on, which is your body needs a little bit, modest amount of inflammation that it creates when you're working out to actually build muscle, right? And I guess there's a concern that some joint health ingredients maybe that work on the inflammation response might interfere with that. But you're saying your research says that's not an issue with Levagen. Is that right?
Exactly. And I think a good analogy for this discussion about inflammation is hormones. People think testosterone for men, estrogen for women, but both genders need a balance of both. We don't want to totally eliminate one and raise the other. So with testosterone, people think, let's get our men's testosterone as high as possible, and they don't need any estrogen. But the reality is that estrogen has important benefits for cardiovascular health and brain health, and we just want a balance between the two. We don't want to completely eliminate or crush our estrogen levels necessarily. And the same thing with inflammation. There are times where an inflammatory response is important, and there's a reason our body behaves that way. And so we want to support a balanced effect, but we don't want to completely eliminate your body's natural response to something.
Well said. So if we summarize the joint and muscle health support we get from Levagen Plus, it sounds like helps reduce joint discomfort, helps reduce stiffness, can start working within days. You found you were statistically significant compared to the placebo after day 14, and certainly after 8 weeks in your first study, you were way more significant than the placebo. And you've also found that it doesn't interfere with muscle formation, which is a good thing. And so it makes it, pretty nice and works differently. As I said, complements the action of some other, joint health ingredients like the ones we use in True Joint, FLX, which is nice because you're hoping you get something incremental. It's a different mechanism of action. Is that a good summary?
Yep, that's right on point.
Good. Okay, so maybe we could talk about a couple of the other benefits if you have a few more minutes for us, Chris. In addition to joint and muscle health, Levagen, as you alluded to, may help with sleep too. What did you guys find here?
Yeah, that's a great point. So at the same dosage as the one found in your joint formula, the 350 milligrams of Levagen Plus providing 300 milligrams of PEA, we found that when taken before bed, in people who had a difficulty falling asleep or a high sleep latency, we found a reduction in that latency, so they're able to fall asleep faster. And then the following morning, they felt it took less time upon waking to feel alert. And then they also felt they had sharper thinking, which would also be another word for improved cognition. So not only were they falling asleep faster, but the next day they noticed a benefit from that ingredient for supporting sleep because it translated into a better morning wake-up experience where maybe they're not immediately leaping out of bed for that cup of coffee just to think about what their partner said when they woke up, or reading the paper, that they feel a little bit more prepared for the day's challenges than they might typically be without Levagen Plus. So a lot of that, I think, comes down to if you have bodily discomfort, mainly just bodily discomfort, or more specifically joint discomfort, it's going to take longer for you to kind of ignore that background noise in your body, right? Or discomfort to fall asleep. So if we're able to address that you're primed for being in a better place to fall asleep. But I want to emphasize that this isn't a sedative or hypnotic ingredient. It's not where it's melatonin and you take it and you need to climb into bed immediately. It's something that you can take during the day or in the evening. So I wouldn't be concerned about this being an ingredient you take for joint health during the day. You're not going to all of a sudden, roll over and start snoring in your chair.
No, it's not exactly. I think the study you did was an 8-week study. So over time, people experience this benefit, right? So, it's not like, we just did a podcast episode on melatonin. I think, as you know, the sales of melatonin supplements have really, pretty much exploded in the last 6-7 years. But, many people, I think 25% of users, based on the surveys, they do experience morning grogginess and, other maybe daytime drowsiness from taking those supplements. I think the key point you mentioned here is it may help you fall asleep faster while not experiencing any grogginess. When you wake up, you actually feel more alert and ready to go on with the day, which is what you want, right?
And it was only in people that had that initial difficulty falling asleep. So if you're someone that falls asleep with less than 10 minutes naturally, it's not like you take it and then you blink and you wake up and it's the next morning. Really, the benefit would be targeted towards people that have a sustained difficulty in terms of number of minutes to fall asleep, that they're going to notice a difference and fall asleep faster. But even in those populations, it's not like they go from 20 minutes to fall asleep to a matter of 60 seconds. You still have time to tuck in and do your bedtime routine. It's not suppressive in some way of your normal kind of waking behavior or anything like that, which is nice because it allows you to use it for the joint benefits during the day. And if you want to take 350 milligrams before bed, you can still do that and not worry about it impacting the next morning. And it's going to be even a net benefit for the next morning.
Yeah, no, I guess, one strategy, if you really want the sleep benefits, you just take your supplement at night, right? Because it won't affect the ability for your body, I don't think, to experience the joint health benefits, and you might get the sleep benefits as a bonus. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep. You could just play with the timing as far as the supplementation of the formula.
Do you recommend splitting the dosage of the Levagen Plus, or can you just take it at one time?
Yeah, it's a great question. Our sleep study, it was all at once, 1 hour before bed. Typically in the joint studies, or in most of our studies, it was twice a day. So the two limitations of PEA is that it's poorly absorbed. This is why we did this Levagen Plus platform. Then it also has a relatively short half-life from my understanding. So if you can, for joint health purposes, spread it out a little bit.
Okay.
I think that would be ideal, but you're still going to notice benefits, in my opinion, from doing it either way. Our goal is to provide adequate PEA to support our body's natural systems. But, even if you consume all of it at one time, at the end of the day, your body is still going to be capable of producing more PEA endogenously.
Right. So you're just supporting the system. So whether you support that system at 12 noon or 6 p.m., over time, probably is not going to make that much of a difference, I would guess.
Yeah.
So we talked about joints, talked about sleep. Is there any other benefits of Levagen Plus from your research you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think the first is for cognitive health. We had Dr. Zariwala just do a presentation at a conference in Switzerland that I was at, VitaFoods Europe, and he talked a little bit about the benefits of Levagen Plus for memory, as well as improving a biomarker of cognitive health called BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for more research on that area for Levagen Plus, which I think is really exciting, that we have another ingredient in the brain health space that can be readily used in a lot of formats. With a lot of cognitive health ingredients on the market today, they're botanicals, and botanicals are great and have many years of traditional use, but they are challenging to work with in terms of, even in capsules, some of them have strong odors, or if you have it in a tablet, they have odor, or if you do it in a drink, they have a very earthy taste to it that's hard to work around. But Levagen Plus is an ingredient that doesn't have any taste on its own. It's very neutral.
Yeah.
And then the second application that we're excited about is for topical use. And because LipiSperse makes the ingredient cold water dispersible, it's also really easily mixable into gels and creams. So we've had some prototypes developed of Levagen Plus in cosmetic applications as well.
Yeah, I mean, I have one question for you on this. I would just comment that Beth has been using some of the Levagen Plus samples that one of your colleagues gave her, and she's really, really impressed, as am I, just seeing the change and, more importantly, the compliment she's getting from others from using that on her skin. So that's really, really interesting. Hopefully you guys do more work in that area sometime soon. I want to ask you, Chris, with respect to the brain health, the memory, and even the topical potential benefits, is that still the same PPAR alpha mechanism at work or something else?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The study measured the brain-derived neurotrophic factor because that could be a contributor as well. I would say that's going to be a longer discussion to go into the full mechanisms behind it.
Okay.
But that is one we're really excited about. I think the PPAR for the topical 100% is where I think it's from, because with topical application, where just like oral ingestion, I think it's the same pathway of supporting a balanced inflammatory response. There's a lot of things in the environment that can irritate our skin, especially cosmetic actives that really work. But whether it's a comfortable experience or you have residual redness or irritation from using the topical, or you're outside and it's really cold out and or it's really dry and the dehumidification of your skin, all these things can contribute to affecting your skin barrier. So the research I'm really excited about in the topical is on that same pathway. But for the cognitive, we do have, I think, a copy of that recording somewhere that we hope to publish, and the study is in the public domain. So people want to look more into that, the brain health angle, and hopefully we revisit with you, Carl. I mean, feel free to launch a brain health formula with Levagen Plus.
We look forward to seeing that publication, see what it says. Chris, before we wrap up, and you've been great, so thank you so much for the time. We're always concerned as our Nature City customers about safety and potential unwanted effects. Is there anything in the research with Levagen or PEA in general that's raised any concerns or cautions?
So with PEA, as I mentioned, there is a good body of research, even dating before Gencor launching this ingredient. But the nice thing about using Levagen is that we maintain the same manufacturing process, the same checks on making sure it's of the adequate concentration of PEA, that it doesn't have excessive levels of bacteria and so on. And then that we've done all of these clinical trials specifically on the material that's gone through our manufacturing process, whereas other manufacturers out there might go, oh, this study showed that PEA is safe, that means mine is too. But the difference with us is that we've done that review from grass, and time after time, we've shown through all these different dosages and application formats that it's been well tolerated. So I don't have any concern, but what I would say with any dietary ingredient, it's always good to have a strong relationship with your doctor or primary care provider and let them know what ingredients you're taking or what you're thinking about taking, just so they have a picture of your whole health history along with your dietary supplement routine.
It's great advice. It's what we advise people too. I mean, I take a long list I bring my long list to the doctor of everything I take, just because it's good. Yeah, they're part of the equation, and so that's great advice for sure. So, Chris, is there anything else we've missed? I think we had a pretty comprehensive discussion. Anything we missed about Levagen that you'd like to add?
I think that's all I've got today, but stay tuned for more clinical trials to follow and hopefully more products from you, Carl.
We will keep working at it. So, Chris, again, thank you so much. We love working with you and the entire team at Gencor. You guys, always produce great, reliable ingredients that we, with great research support, I should say, that our clients can feel confident about using. As I mentioned, Levagen Plus is now part of the True Joint FLX formula. Again, making what already was a pretty great product, I think, and hopefully an even better upgrade that you can look forward to even more support. So, Chris, thank you again. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
So that's it for this week's episode. If you like the information, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also find us on your favorite streaming services on Apple Podcast or Spotify. You can also join our email list at NicheSeed.com, and you'll be alerted when there are new podcasts, the latest and greatest information on supplements available. So I'm Carl Pradelli, and I'll see you next week.